Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Jared, also known as the Game Master Chef, and in this video I wanted to teach you the 5 principles I like to keep in mind when running my games. Listen up guys, this is going to be fundamental and it's going to help you run your table like a boss. The first principle I want you guys to remember is this is everyone's game. That means that you are catering for your players, but also you need to make sure that you're having fun. So if you're the kind of GM who comes in with a 10-minute narrative to open up their games, if you really like to railroad players or, try to have a certain outcome happen, maybe game mastering isn't necessarily for you and you should, try writing a novel or a screenplay, or maybe you just need more practice. But what I'm getting at here is that you should always try and leave room for flexibility because everybody's going to want to try different ideas and you need to be able to facilitate them as a game master. On the flip side of this, you need to keep in mind that you need to be having fun as well. So like I've touched on in my first video, is you need to make sure that you're playing something that is enjoyable for you because you are a player as well. The second thing I want to cover is the idea of how to improvise. Now, I believe that good improvisation is built on good preparation. This kind of leads straight in from my first point, which is you want to be able to be flexible. You want to be able to let your players push boundaries and if they need to break those boundaries. But a lot of new GMs get caught on this because they think, no, if I let them just go off the rails out of what I've prepped, I'm going to fumble and I'm going to lose myself. You're not going to know how good you are at improvisation until you go into a session expecting the unexpected. So the way that I like to prep for the unexpected is with lists, with information that I like to have at hand. There's a rule in chefing, or rather a principle or an art in chefing called mise en place, and this is a French term that means in its place. The idea behind this is that as a chef, we do preparation so that during service, all we have to do is create, put things together, and send that food out. We're not cutting, we're not chopping or doing any heavy prep. We get all of that ahead of time and we have everything that we need at hand in its place. This is something that you'll learn as a game master eventually. What prep works for you might not work for me. You might need a whole bunch of NPC names or notes on their voices, whereas for me, I can come up with NPC names fairly quickly now, but I always have that kind of thing at hand in case it comes up. So what kind of things do I like to have ready for this kind of prep? I like to have a rough idea of what the locations are around the areas so that the players, if they wander, I have a rough idea of where they might go. I'll have an idea of what's available to them in terms of shops, magic items, all the things that they're going to investigate and need. And of course, I've only learned this over time, so you will eventually too. NPCs are another thing that you want to be able to prep or at least be able to come up with very, very quickly because you may end up with a whole cast of characters come out of one evening's play. If this is the case, you want to be able to take notes of who you ended up portraying and bringing to life. But you really also want to make sure that every NPC has got a unique quirk or something memorable about them. Otherwise, you just end up with a huge roster or nobody ends up knowing who they were really talking to. So this leads straight into my third principle, which is preparing setting, not story. What I'm getting at here is that you don't want to necessarily prep the whole story. You don't want to flesh out exactly the beginning, middle, and end like a beautiful 3-act play or story. You want to leave a lot of ambiguity in between. You can have a big bad villain, but don't get too attached to the idea that that's going to be the main challenge for your players. They may come up with their own trials and tribulations along the way. Effectively, what I'm getting at here is you want to know the who, what, where, and why of the world, rather than exactly what the players should or could be doing. Because, for example, when I was running the Eberron setting, I knew that my players were going to have to travel to the Moorlands eventually. That was something that I had put in their quest and they understood and they were picking up this quest, so travel was going to ensue. They had a couple of options for this. They could go by sea because one of the players just happened to be a sailor, so that was an option. There was the lightning rail because they're starting in the city of Sharn, so it's a big city and they would be on the lightning rail, which is a magical train using magic in the world of Eberron. Or they could use the elemental airships of the Eberron setting, which I was hoping they would. They ended up choosing the lightning rail, which wasn't a problem for me because it's not like I had prepped a specific encounter on the airship or a specific battle that was going to happen on the ships. I could adapt and improvise, and when they decided to take the lightning rail, the encounter that they had along the way was completely unplanned. I was reading out the carriages just kind of out loud to myself, and when I had said, "Ooh, the ghost carriage," I hadn't realized that that was on the map that I had pulled from the internet, and suddenly that became a hook that all the players went, "What's the ghost carriage?" And I said, "You overhear some NPCs discussing how there's a haunted carriage on this ship, or rather, on the train." This led to a very natural progression where I was able to put in some story elements about the Mournlands and where they were going, because they had realized that this haunted carriage was inhabited by some spectral beings that had come from the Mournlands when this train had last passed by. So to summarize principle number 3 in a nutshell, you're effectively getting all the elements that you need ready so that they can all synergize at the table when you need them, and hopefully not in the way that you expect, because if you know what was coming, that's a bit boring. And for me, the best part of dungeon mastering is reacting to the unexpected choices my players want to make. Speaking of players and of course their characters, the 4th principle is be a huge fan of your players and their characters. Now, this doesn't mean play favorites or pick one fan favorite that you're gonna treat like a hero, and don't treat all of them like heroes that are untouchable and invulnerable all the time. You can use some DM magic here and there to perhaps take them out of dodgy situations, but your world needs to have a real threat. So when they do have heroic victories, celebrate with them, get excited. When they do have tragic moments, mourn with them, feel what your players are feeling and empathize with them. And that way they understand that you're not just some ruthless, heartless DM, and that you do want them to have those highs and lows. This, over a long period of time, is going to create some amazing moments, and you're going to feel the highs and lows of what a good story should be. You're going to have victories, you're going to have failures, and these are going to last with your players as good, solid memories. And to wrap up this one, guys, we come to our 5th principle, which is always say yes. Now, some people are going to disagree with me, and there are definitely certain moments when you can't necessarily see how this idea would ever work mechanically. So what I like to say in that case is you can certainly try. I don't like to shut an idea down before it even gets a chance to be tested or trialed. So I'll ask for a skill check, and I might set that DC incredibly high because, at the end of the day, it's collaborative storytelling, and if a crazy bonkers idea ends up being supported by a beautiful dice roll, who am I to let that fail? Now, there can be certain things that you can get entangled with if you keep saying yes. So just keep that in mind if you're going to go completely down a road that you're not expecting or you don't think is fun. You're not enjoying it, some of the other players aren't enjoying it. For example, you might have a player who always wants to wander away from the group. Try and guide them back with world interactions, bring an NPC in to help guide their decisions, or make sure you've got a really good motivation and a good reason for that player character to come back in. Now, when you can say no is when you try to speak to your players out of game. If you have a player who's just doing something really unexpected or causing friction in the group, you can bring that to a halt with good communication. I'm going to shoot a whole episode on communication very, very soon, because I feel that that is the core of how to keep a game group happy and how to have an amazing long campaign with nobody getting hurt feelings. Well, that was my 5 principles of good game mastering. I hope you got something out of this, and if you did, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Like the video, as it always helps me out. And if you know someone who might benefit from one of these principles for them to keep in mind during their games, please share it with someone who you think might enjoy this. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.